it's a privilege for me to introduce my wonderful colleague, Jackie Glover. Jackie is a professor of pediatrics and also in the Center for Bioethics and Humanities at the University of Colorado in the Denver Anschutz Medical Campus. Jackie and I met actually
Don't say
in
how
the
long ago.
beginning of our careers in bioethics at Children's National Medical Center, where I was the nurse liaison to the Office of Ethics and Jackie was the philosopher in residence, and was preceded by our own John Marino as the first philosopher in residence. And so we had the wonderful privilege of working together, trying to create a hospital-based ethics center there at Children's National Medical Center. Jackie went on to do some really great things. She's known for her work in ethics education, and in particular interprofessional ethics. And one of the things that Jackie and I have often worked together around is how to bring the many voices into the dialogue about ethical issues. She has done extensive work in pediatrics and ethics consultation and rural bioethics. She's the director of the clinical ethics program at the University of Colorado, and works with the ethics committees there at the University of Colorado Hospital and the Children's Hospital of Colorado. She also directs the center's efforts to reach out to ethics committees across the state and the regions. She served nationally in as part of the ethics committee of the American Board of Pediatrics from 1990 to 2008. And she was a member of the American Society for Bioethics and Humanities ASBH task force that wrote and revised the core competencies for clinical ethics consultation. She's also served on the ASBH clinical task force that developed the resource document to help for education of ethics committee members on those standards. And really has been an incredible inspiration to my own work, and I'm delighted for you to have the opportunity to hear her speak about the cases that keep you up at night, preserving personal and professional integrity. So join me in welcoming Jackie.
Thank you so much, Cinda, for that generous introduction. Can everyone hear me? And thank you for this opportunity to talk together about something that has fascinated me for a very long time. That's integrity. Giving me the opportunity to read more and look more carefully at the literature. You seem to see integrity everywhere you look, the word. It appears on hospital value statements. I don't know about yours. Is it part of Johns Hopkins? Yeah. It also, coming from the annual meeting of the American Society for Bioethics and Humanities, it's part of the new Code of Ethics for healthcare ethics consultants. And it was even mentioned on my Delta flight here from Atlanta to Baltimore. So if it's not just a marketing tool for our hospitals and for our airlines, what is it and how can it help us? So I have been invited to be as interactive as possible, but that requires two things: me to ask you and you to respond and be interactive. Can you do that when you don't have your mouths full of pizza? And so our session today, we're going to do 4 things. We're going to reflect together about our deeply troubling cases. You don't have to share them, but I hope you will. And we're going to talk about what is integrity. We're going to talk about why it matters and how it can help us and how can we preserve integrity. So just take a moment and think about a troubling case, maybe the most recent one or the most troubling, difficult ethical case. Think about what the central issue was. Think about why it was so troubling and difficult. What were the features that made it stand out and keep you from your good slumber and dreams? And how did you justify your choice when you made the choice? So I'll give you a few minutes just to think about it. If you're, well, you're eating, so you're not inclined to be anal and write it down. So just think about your most troubling, difficult ethical case. And if you don't have one that keeps you up at night, I need to tell that secret to all of us, and maybe you should be doing that talk, this talk. So everyone have a case in mind? Okay. I have mine, but I would rather talk about yours for obvious reasons. So what were the troubling features of this case? Anyone willing to share a central issue and the troubling features?
So mine is not a clinical case, but a research ethics case, and I'll say that the most troubling piece was the uncertainty of, about which direction to sort of help this person go, and the sort of challenge of helping them to find the answer that was most, I wanted them to come to a decision themselves rather than me telling them what I think they should do.
Excellent. So perplexing cases. What should I do? Other features? Come on, you promised.
I had a case when I was a resident. I'm a pediatrician. I had a situation where a child had a genetic condition that the child certainly was going to die before the child was 5. And the parents did not accept that medical conclusion and wanted everything done possible anytime that anything happened with the child. And the child underwent many invasive medical procedures that prolonged the child's life, but at great pain to the child. And it was very distressing to all of the healthcare providers that were caring for the child.
So really deep conflict among the stakeholders. And you said distressing. So not only the family, between the family and the care team, but within people's conceptions of what it meant to be a good practitioner. It was like, how can I do this? This is not why I went to medical school. This is not why I went to nursing school. So maybe we're reaching to those features of integrity. You felt like, I can't do this. Any other features? So perplexity, complexity, and then disagreement among the stakeholders, deeply held commitments, and not feeling like you are acting as a good doctor or a good nurse or a good social worker or a good chaplain acts. Gail?
So this also isn't a directly clinical case, it's indirect. I've been doing some focus groups of clinicians as part of another study, and in the focus groups I've done of nurses, a number of times the issue arose of patients who leave against medical advice and how it makes the nurses feel. And the sort of, I'll use the word distress again, but it's more complicated than that. I think at a very fundamental level, they really feel like their whole purpose is being questioned.
And especially in pediatrics. In the adult world, we have autonomy to lean on. This is what the patient wants. If they have capacity, bye-bye. But in pediatrics, where we're in conflict with, often in conflict with the family, like in your case, it feels like we have an independent obligation to this child that is not completely explained away by the parents' autonomy. Any other? Yes.
I'm an obstetrician and do a lot of HIV work, so I think one of the common multiple patients issues related to disclosure of their HIV status to a partner while having unprotected sex. So for pregnant women, not being adherent to the medication, so that their viral load is high, which increases the risk of transmission to baby. Those are fairly common scenarios.
Oh, yeah. So the same kind of constellation of disagreement, and the stakeholders have different values, maybe even capacity, but the most troubling of entities of pregnant women with a patient inside a patient, and how do you maneuver that ultimate stakeholder, if you will, that's not really capturing the conflict. Great, thanks. Hi.
Hi. I'd like to add a population base or a public health
Great.
issue where on at least a couple of occasions, I thought that there was a technological fix to a problem that presented risk for a population that would save many lives, maybe this many lives, but it might cost this many lives to people who weren't at risk without the technological innovation, then wondered how you deal with that and live with the lives lost while you save more lives.
Wow, yeah, trade-offs. What's behind the difficulty? We can't even say the R word, making decisions about you don't get, you get. Yeah. And how do you balance that? Excellent. In the back, yeah, thanks.
From a pastoral care perspective, the idea of the patient and chaplain in confidence, and I'm sharing this with you as a confession, you're my church member, and then for the ethical implications of do I share that with the team, or what is my role?
If you're part of the team, teams have to share. That's why they work so effectively at teams. But maybe this is in the confidence of the spiritual care provider-patient relationship. Excellent. Any others? Well, my most recent one involved a really serious legal question on top of the really, really serious ethical question. And so the hospital was really invested in the decision-making and making nice. And so it was made known that in order to, legal was involved on a multitude of levels. One was being sued and malpractice. One was the sheer legality of what was proposed. So the pressure was on the ethics consultation to do it under the auspices of legal counsel. So legal counsel was willing to have us involved, but it really constrained, according to our process, how we usually do things, not just the timing, but the safety that we try to establish between the people involved in the consult and the people doing the consult. And it was on multiple levels. So I experienced the kind of pressure when something comes down on high in a power differential, and I'm used to thinking ethics has no power differentials. We can talk to anyone. Speak truth to power. And so that kind of, could I have spoken up more deliberately, louder, longer? What could have changed that dynamic? So we could have done the consult that we thought was appropriate to do. And so one feature of things that, maybe everything keeps me awake at night, but one feature of those things is when not just the issue itself is perplexing and complex, and there's multiple stakeholders in disagreement, but sometimes it's not only disagreement, but power differentials, and people are telling you to do things that you don't think are right. And so that, I think those, anyone else have a feature of things that keep us up at night? That's pretty exhausting, exhaustive. Freudian slip, exhausting.
Jackie?
Yeah.
I think another element is when you're really in a dilemma where either choice
Yeah.
has reasons that are reasonable and justifiable, and either one that you choose is not satisfactory.
Right. Good.
And so there's that sort of residue of no matter what you did, you still have unmet obligations.
Keep that thought. We're going to return to that. Any other features? How about the justifications of you chose to allow this family to keep going, doing more and more and more. You chose to really help the person discern what was right for them. Can you reveal what you chose in the justification, or was it just displaying the choices? What are the nature, what are the features of the justifications that you came up with, that you're reviewing in the wee hours of the night? Guaranteed, after a hard consult, you can call me at 3 in the morning, I will be up. Going over and over in my feet. And maybe that's the justification. There is a justification, equal justification for both choices. Other justifications. It's it respects the most important values or disrespects the least important harms on balance. It's the right balance to strike. Other possible justifications, I was doing my duty of sorts. I was fulfilling my obligation as a research ethics consultant. How did you kind of think through that horrible dilemma of lots, little?
That there must, I'm not an ethicist, that there must be some ratio of lives saved and lives lost where it becomes reasonable. And if it's, you saved 10 lives, but 1 life was lost, or you saved 100 lives, or you saved 1,000 lives, but 1 life was lost, where does that ratio become proper, if it ever does? And then do you advocate for the public health intervention?
Yeah.
I feel like our justification at end of life is we won't have to live with this, the parents do.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is done in that capsule. As
So-
much as we don't like what we're doing, it's their child and they have to live with it.
So even though we have residue, these are the parents that incorporate the death of their child into their history. They'll visit the grave site, yeah, more invested. Or maybe it was appeal to integrity. If I just told them, it would be not true to what my role is, in fact. But when I say integrity, when you read what this was about and still came, or maybe it's wonderful pizza, what does integrity mean to you? When you hear it on the Delta commercial.
Mm-hmm.
Staying in touch with core values.
Staying in touch with core values, in the face sometimes of adversity. You're true to your core values that make you who you are. Gail?
No, I was actually just thinking about another example, but it's,
Anyone else? Sir.
Integrity implies positive core values.
Yes, yes.
Someone might stay true to their negative core values, which are really sorry.
Is there such a thing as a negative value? That's going to be part of our conversation. Yeah. Anyone else? So it comes from the Latin integritas, from completeness, wholeness. Integers are the same root as integritas. And so in the descriptive sense, I thought someone would go to Bridges and curriculum. So the quality of state of being complete, like a curriculum, the entire unimpaired or perfect state or quality, like a bridge or metal. One time I did research on fatigue, and there is a little about research fatigue and lots about bridge metal fatigue. So the same thing, there's a descriptive element to integrity, but there's also that normative element of the quality and state of being of sound moral principle. But how do you, that pesky question about negative values, how do you know that what is sound moral principle? And there's at least 2 ways to think about it. This is from Denise Dzinski's wonderful article about integrity, principle, coherence, virtue, or both. And she obviously wants to say both. So identity formation, it's an exercise for each autonomous agent, totally Kantian, to discern and shape our personality and identify. And that identity confers a core set of values. What we mean by saying things like can't live with myself, or it's a core set of values that makes me who I am. Or we can have principle coherence that says, you know, you can come up with values. I'm still not sure you can come up with negative values, but they are a stable set of values, commitments that are consistent among and between themselves. And you notice if you judge, I was afraid that would happen. Excuse me. I'll walk around less. It doesn't have a little thingy on it. So if you judge by formal criteria, it really embraces the diversity around commitments, experiences, cultures, and it accounts for different reasonable people have different life plans and different sets of values. But they have to be coherent, consistent in a couple ways. Consistent among themselves, and there has to be consistency between their beliefs and their behaviors, their actions. But there is another use of integrity that really reaches to moral integrity, not very normative, but in the sense of not every life counts equally as something that one should be committed to. And Denise calls that arete, from arete, the Aristotelian excellence in the human life. When she's reaching toward, you don't, that integrity implies, in a sense, other regarding behaviors. You can't just be true to yourself. You have to be true to others in some significant, important way. And so we talk about virtues involved in integrity. Can you shout out some of the virtues that you think are, one is consistency, maybe humility. What other virtues do you think of when you think of living an excellent, put your Aristotelian hats on if that's possible. It's not possible for many of us, but put that perspective on. What kind of virtues are we talking about? Holly?
Compassion.
Compassion? Humility, did I say that already? Humility? Courage? Courage?
Empathy.
Empathy?
Fidelity.
Fidelity?
Honesty.
Honesty, good. Others? Maybe charity?
Gratitude.
Gratitude? Good.
Truth-seeking.
Yeah, honesty.
Truth-seeking.
Oh, truth-seeking. Ah, okay. Maybe a value of self-reflection, critical self-reflection. Okay, so there's a point where integrity, under the excellence, the Aristotelic view, is being true to yourself, or the ideal that you wish you were, and acting, believing and acting on that desire to live an excellent human life, and actually being trustworthy, steadfast and trustworthy, the kind of person that your friends say, you can count on Ruth. She's good and she's wise. And so we must have worthy goals, authentic concern for the well-being of others, an aptitude for critical self-reflection, and possess the disposition and virtues necessary to actualize our life plans. under those two understandings of what integrity is. And now to what Cinda was, so in a very real sense, when we talk about sound moral principles and integrity, we're talking about in the middle of the night when someone says, I can't do that, I can't do that, I just can't do that. But interestingly, is it because Jackie can't do it as an independent person, or because Jackie in her role as ethics consultant couldn't do it? Were you stressed because your name?
I'm Michelle.
Michelle can't do it, or is it because you possess professional integrity that is perhaps violated? So personal and professional, is that the same thing? How many people think it's the same thing? How many people say, no, different things? How many people, I don't know. I don't know. Okay, good. So some people claim that that you can live high standards of competence. You put on that white coat, you walk up those stairs, and you are transformed into an excellent human being. And what you do on your own time has no impact on what you are at the job. I'm using job loosely. How many think that's okay? That's right. How many people? No, that's not right. How many people still don't know? Keep talking. Yeah, good. I was a member, as Cinda said, of that task force writing the core competencies. And when we got to character, whoa, all hell broke loose. Really, really serious, deep, wonderful discussions, but serious, deep disagreement about whether I could be an excellent ethics consultant and cheat on my taxes, or cheat on my husband for that matter. It had no bearing on my life as an ethics consultant. Does that sound right?
The Bill Clinton phenomenon.
Oh, the Bill Clinton phenomenon. Yeah. Other people say, and the other way around. I actually agree with the majority here of if integrity is the unity of virtues, it's a characteristic that crosses all avenues of a life. And it's not possible to act one way towards your children and your husband and your neighbors and then put on this white coat and don a whole new other regarding perspective. I don't think that's possible to do. But there are role-specific obligations that maybe make these different in another way. So if I'm in the military, I have a license to kill in certain circumstances that doesn't extend into my personal life. If I'm a lawyer, can you confess? Any lawyers in the room? Okay, good. Oh, good. I got you doubled. You're defending a rapist, and they confess to you, and you know they're guilty. But under your obligation to be a zealous defender of your client, you try the person is on the stand, and you use all your considerable skills to discredit her, even though you know she's telling the truth. Role-specific obligation. You would never consider yourself an excellent human being if you did that to your neighbors, for example, and didn't honor truth-telling and listening and being more regarding. Are there any healthcare examples of this role-specific obligations that are not in your private life? Surgeons in the room? You can't cut people up except in that role. Let me take that out. Some people would say diagnostics. You know, you can't come up to the person on the beach and say, whoa, look at that mole. That's kind of a, would you do that? If you did that, I'm sorry. But there are some things that occur specifically in your role. Other examples of when, but those are not nearly as killing people and degrading people, demoralizing people. I couldn't think of a healthcare example where you would do something. Yeah.
See if like you're in public and you, well, I'm a social worker and you see like a parent hitting a child or something like that.
Well, I would do that. I would go up and say, what are you doing? Interesting. So there are some things that attend to your role-specific duties that don't attend to your private life. But for the most part, they should be compatible and interdependent. Part of your identity is as a doctor, as a lawyer, as a researcher, as a philosopher, as a nurse, as a social worker, as a chaplain. That's part of who you are. Think back the last time you introduced yourself at a party. Who are you? Did you say, maybe you did, I'm the mother of 2 children. But usually we really identify with our professions. I'm a pediatrician. I'm a palliative care doctor at the hospital. So to separate them so distinctly from our integrity as human beings seems problematic. A friend told me about a play that was put on by the Denver Center Theater back in 1999 called The Kingdom. And I didn't see the play, but I did go online and read the study notes. Really interesting. About a kind of Disney-esque, they didn't call it Disney, but it was what's Disney? Orlando. A theme park for everyone's happy. It's a small world after all, and everything's grand, and diversity, and life is rich and full. And at the same time, they were expanding this theme park out into a poor neighborhood. And so, and the guy that is responsible for this improvement of the theme park happens to meet, or she works for the theme park, a single mom with kids struggling to make ends meet. So fantasy and the goodness of the theme park really intruded on the life of people that now he knows. And that brought to mind that we can't, and he struggled to be one person at work as the faithful employee of this theme park, but he could not after he got to know this woman and saw what his work life meant to his personal life. And as our institutions expand out into neighborhoods, it rang a bell for me. What is the good in the institution as compared to the good in people's lives? So here's Cinda's point. So, is there such a thing as moral compromise? What do you think? Seems like an oxymoron, doesn't it? Are you going to compromise your deeply held moral values? And that is one sense of compromise. It is an oxymoron in some respects. It can't. That's when you're told to do something that you believe to be the wrong thing, and you do it anyway. Out of lack of willpower, or maybe self-deception, it's not so bad for us. A rising tide raises all boats, a rising theme park raises all neighborhoods, that sort of thing. But there is a sense in which compromise doesn't necessarily mean lack of integrity. When you use a more formal and even excellence-based, reasonable people do disagree. And there is a sense in which I can respect you for your choices, even though I wouldn't do that. And so there is a sense that that's not quite compromise, but in a really perplexing dilemma, I'll use the technical term right, that there's equally powerful reasons to do opposing things. In a dilemma, you can reconsider what you have done. All things being equal, one, maybe I say, oh, I wouldn't kind of judge it that way, but I understand why you judged it that way, and it doesn't constitute any lack of integrity. It's really more true to the moral life, which is very complex, and people, reasonable people, disagree. And so it constitutes maybe the virtue of listening very carefully and critical self-reflection. Am I the only one that's right here? After all, the coherence doesn't require my, that's dogma, my unconsidered allegiance to some principle. I don't think that's what coherence means. That switches over to dogma. So we can reassess, reconsider, we can change our minds. And that's compromising without compromising our integrity. So in the wee hours of the morning, at 3 o'clock, when we're all awake, are we feeling, sir?
Isn't this connected to the problem of complicity as well?
Yep. He's asking, does this attach to the problem of complicity? Where are you on the causal chain to the action that you either embrace or not embrace? And so if you really thought it was wrong to write a unilateral DNIR order for this child against the objections of the parents, but you're the newest doctor, and the head of the unit said this is the way you're going, and you let it happen. Maybe you even conscientiously said, if this is the way you go, you have to take care of this patient, but I can't do it. But if you do it, and you're complicit in the action that you think is the wrong action, maybe what you're feeling is guilt. And maybe you should be feeling guilt. But the other sense of compromise, maybe what you're feeling is regret. And regret is, I think, there's no reason why you should feel guilty in this instance, or maybe you just regret it. And maybe there's two senses of that regret. The first one is it was a really difficult choice, right? It's a really difficult choice. You couldn't do both things. You had to make a choice, and there's no perfect way to get out of it. And so on balance, you chose one. But still, in your mind, you're satisfied. I chose well, and on balance, this is what I should have chosen. But I did that, and that child suffered. So you do not respect one principle. And in a deep sense, other people disagree. But if you made the right choice, there's no reason that you should feel guilt or regret or no residue. I made the right choice, so I should be able to sleep at night. But I think that in a true dilemma, where all things being equal, when I, on balance, make the best choice, I still feel a little regret that it's not a perfect world, and there's tragic choices. And yes, this was the child of her parents, and on balance, they're going to live with her death in ways that I am never going to incorporate that death into my life as a professional. But that child suffered, and I promise not to have people suffer, and I was part of that. Not complicit in the same way as maybe the parents are. No, let's not go there. And the other sense is that you are very self-reflective, and you're talking about it. You know, you go to a meeting and you're sharing war stories, cases. The worst reaction that everyone fears is someone saying, "You did what?" Never mind. Didn't mean it. Just kidding. After conversation about your judgment, someone sees things a little differently and opens your eyes to, you reconsider and you changed your mind. It wasn't that, on balance, that you made a choice that now, and you made the right choice, but you really didn't do everything you wanted to do. But this is, you made a choice that at the time, given knowing what you knew, you made a choice, and now, with reflection, you thought, never thought of it that way. And you reassessed and reconsidered and changed your mind. And now to, I think, Cinda's favorite topic, residue. And I think I'm going to try to recapture residue from being a totally negative concept to being a really good concept. See if I'm successful. And there's at least 3 kinds of residue. One kind is you succumbed to the pressure of the head of the unit, and you went against your best judgment, moral judgment, clinical judgment, and you did something that you knew was wrong at the time, or researchers in the room. Someone's data mining, they're looking at the data a little uniquely, and you knew at the time that that wasn't acceptable, but the power structure was such that you couldn't speak up. We thought you have other obligations to your family to keep this job. So one sense of residue is that guilty residue. When we were talking in class about conflicts of interest, one student said, "I feel dirty." That's the sense of residue, that you went against your own best judgment. And maybe that's the really negative view of residue. And the other one is potentially equally negative. When you make the best choice possible, but you still didn't do something that you wanted to do, that's life, and it can be tragic. And I think that's the residue that we build up making moral judgments. That's the moral complexity of making choices in a really complex environment. And that is not negative like the guilty residue that I hope I don't get caught. But it's residue nonetheless. And if you don't do anything with that, it can really compromise your ability to stay in your position. The third kind of residue, I think, has the most potential for us as we're up at night, reconsidering our choices. Not only is reassessing and reconsidering really a necessary part of being a moral agent in this world, but this residue says, I thought I was right. I'm not going to be dogmatic and hold to my guns and find a way to argue you down from my obviously right position. I'm going to actually listen to you and perhaps think, I could be wrong. So tell me. So when we reassess and reconsider and change our minds, I think that's another kind of residue, but it's a very positive, enhancing residue that we should all strive to have. So maybe that's behind being seasoned. You've been through the wars, you have been open, you have contemplated, reassessed critically, and you have changed your mind. That's what it means to be a decision maker in this complex world that we live in. This is how we live and learn, maybe not positive, but least problematic. But I think it's positive. Don't you think it's positive to change your mind? And so my last slide is about, we talked about things that keep us up at night. We considered the features of that troubling, difficult case. We talked about what we mean by integrity, or formal concepts of identity and coherence, and also virtue-based concepts that really rely on the virtues that we can name, and the integrity as unity of virtue. But how does it help us preserve our integrity? What does it take to preserve our integrity? Do Do you have any thoughts about that? We don't go through life going, ouch, 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 I'm a mean, horrible person. You should arrest me, I'm a horrible doctor, I'm a horrible lawyer, I'm a horrible chaplain, I'm a horrible social worker. What do we do? Even in the toughest cases. Well, this is what I think we do. And it's a way to preserve our integrity. We cultivate communities of discernment. And if we don't intentionally do it, I think we ought to intentionally do it. You can't be a solo. My worst nightmare is someone handing me a pager and saying, "You're it. You're the ethics consultant. Go out and you do good." Oh my God, that's a nightmare. Our moral lives are lived in critical conversations with others. There's limits to using your family that way, but we have obligations to use our colleagues that way over troubling cases. Not just clinical debriefs about, M&Ms, what went wrong clinically, but deep communities of discernment. This is what I thought I was doing. Help me. What did you hear? What did you say? What did you do? And genuine communication around, this is what I strive to be. I strive to be the most compassionate, competent, careful, caring physician. And I ended up keeping this child alive for fill in the blank, and she suffered. How can I live with myself? How can I consider myself a good doctor or a good lawyer ever again? And it's in those communities of discernment that people see things differently. They bring us to remember the ways in which we did it in this case, and in this case, and in this case. And they help us see how we can view it differently, or if not differently, if not saying, well, all things being equal, I would do the same thing after that process, or all things being equal, I think I would do something different, and this is what I would do differently, and then move on to the next case. In our hospital, we want to be Project Zero, a safety goal, is that Project Zero? And so our QI director starts every meeting with a quality story. It's kind of a joke, but we expect it, and it really works to change our attitude about what we're there for. It's do you have a state safety story? And we kind of giggle, and then everyone thinks about, oh, I do have a state safety story, and then it really raises the conversation. If we started meetings with ethics stories on the units, do you have an ethics story today? And it's not all negative. People can change their behavior based on what they hear. Oh, we can change this systematically, so there's no chance that when I reapply the ID band, they're going to get the wrong ID band. It's a systems issue. Or successes. Someone at the last minute checked, and sure enough, that was the wrong med. So they're both negative. We can learn from our mistakes, and positive. And what if we started our meetings with an ethics story about a difficult case? I don't know how we fit it into our busy lives, but that's kind of reasoned, critical self-examination in community. And so Parker Palmer, I don't know if you've read any of his stuff, Heart at Work is the most recent one. We can't, everyone said, no, you can't, Jackie, you can't cheat on your taxes, you can't cheat on your husband to be a good ethicist. We have a notion of it's not acceptable to live a divided life, but it's so difficult to lead an undivided life. And one way to preserve our integrity is to strive and leave the question of an undivided life always before us as we contemplate our choices. And so Parker Palmer has us always asking, how do I stay close to the passions and commitments that took me into this work, challenging myself and my colleagues and the institution to keep the faith with the profession's deepest values. So that's my last question to you. How do you think we do this? Even asking the question is the first step. But how do we do this?
Courage.
With courage. There's a lot of moral courage discussion at the American Society for Bioethics and Humanities. But it's not just individual courage to speak truth to power and get shunned. It's courage of institutions to function in ways that don't make it so necessary to be courageous to do your job. I think one of it is to embed these kinds of, a culture of discernment. Make it okay to have these conversations. And embed at various places this kind of revisiting. We have another thing at our hospital. It's called Pause to Care. It's not the health dogs. It comes out of Caritas movement. You're a nurse on a busy unit, and you're like juggling fires and juggling something and stamping out fires. And you left your asbestos boots at home. But you pause before the door, and you take a breath and remember what you are there to do. Not just a task, not just make sure you got your 8 o'clock meds, which is good to do, but you're part of a healing team. This is a healing. You're going to come into, in some religious language, you're coming into some sacred healing space, not even look up, not even except to check the wristband, but to make contact with the sick and vulnerable patient and their family. And so those kinds of activities, when you are in touch with how you know when your buttons are pushed in a meeting, heart math, things like that, when I blow a gasket, I don't know what triggered. I have a little thing that blew in my eye. I'm thinking, interesting. Got an email from a colleague. So knowing when you're triggered and how to get out of that trigger, to be part of that open and real, genuine discussion and reassessment. Other things, what do you do at Hopkins? Rounds like this, avenues like this, discussions, reading about ethics. Schwartz rounds, excellent.
Sometimes I think we're looking for systematic ways to identify some of the situations that threaten our sense of integrity more systematically, because they do happen in themes and recurrences, and trying to look for evidence of that in the system so we can pause before it becomes a huge issue and maybe try to work with it without so much cost.
Yeah.
And I want to emphasize the sort of interrelatedness between clinical practice and education, and that this is an entire culture.
Yes.
I'm not a clinician, but I have a lot of involvement with medical education. And one of the biggest challenges that I experience is, what does it mean to advocate for certain things in a medical school environment when you are sort of perceived as being, I don't know, getting in the way of the majority. And I've had a number of experiences of advocating for students on particular issues, against the sort of general worldview. I'm sure the same thing happens in clinical care. So, but I'm not sure how to. That's a big nut to crack culturally.
Yeah.
It does have to do with hierarchy, but in this case, it's not. I mean, I don't care. I'm at a position in my career where I'm not going to get fired. I don't care what people think of me, but I don't feel like it's good to alienate colleagues either for the sake of
Yes.
future benefit to students. So it's sort of one student against the collective.
Well, thank you for reminding me of our profession as educators. Yeah, and it's truly that clinical and education is so intermeshed. Any thoughts about advocacy? I tell my students I'm a listener, and I tell them, you know, if you're not suicidal or homicidal, what happens in Jackie's office stays in Jackie's office. But in larger discussions, it's about your safety. And so we have to find ways, not the poor medical student who's the lowest person on that totem pole. We have to find ways to have conversations where you're not at risk, or new faculty are not at risk. And we have professionalism forums, but it's really a hard nut to crack. Yeah, very hard. I think it's almost easier in the clinical environment because everyone can't deny the immediacy of that patient and the immediacy of the help and the harm. But it's just education, and it's been that way for a billion years. And I was hazed, I was pimped. That's the only way to learn. That's hard to really. Other thoughts about how we ask ourselves this commitment, how we preserve our integrity? And I think it's institutional. And people, one person can make a big change, a new CEO, a new president that says, no, this is a priority, and we're going to find ways to have this discussion always before us. But there's old guard and new guard, and medium guard, but it's always guard. These military metaphors. You get the last word. So, next time you're awake at 3 in the morning, it's a good thing, maybe, for the most part. Yeah?
One thing that keeps going through my mind is forgiveness.
Ooh.
And to me, in order to maintain some sense of integrity, and forgiveness has to go both ways. And it very much obviously gets into the spiritual realm, but without that, I think it's very difficult.
That's an excellent point.